All right, let's talk about something that is, without a doubt, one of the most important tools you'll ever use as a programmer: Python functions. We're going to see how these little powerhouses can take your code from a repetitive mess to something clean, elegant, and super reusable. So, you ready? Let's get into it. Okay, let me paint a picture. See if this sounds familiar. You're coding along, and you find yourself copying and pasting the same 5, 10 lines of code, again and again. It feels clunky, right? It's totally inefficient. And the worst part, if you find a bug or need to change one little thing, you have to go on this massive search and destroy mission to find every single copy. Ugh. Well, I'm here to tell you there is a much better way.
And that solution, that hero that's going to rescue you from the nightmare of code repetition, is, you guessed it, the function.
So what exactly is a function when you boil it down? Well, think of it as a reusable block of code that does one specific thing. My favorite way to think about it is like a recipe, right? You write down the instructions for your amazing chocolate cake once. You give it a name, and then whenever you want that cake, you just pull out the recipe. You don't have to refigure out the ingredients and steps every single time. Functions are just like that for your code. And these code recipes are super flexible. They can take in ingredients. In the programming world, we call those parameters. They perform all the steps in the recipe, that's the action part, and then more often than not, they give you something back at the end, the output, the delicious finished cake. And when you start building your code this way, everything just becomes so much more organized, modular. Honestly, it just makes coding way more fun. Okay, so you're sold on the idea, but how do you actually write one of these things in Python? Let's take a look at the anatomy of a function. First things first, you start with the keyword def. That's you telling Python, hey, pay attention, I'm about to define a function. Next, you give it a unique name, something that makes sense, like greet. Then you have the parentheses. Inside there, you put your parameters. Those are the placeholders for any ingredients your function will need. After that, you pop a colon on the end, and here's the really important part. The next line has to be indented. Everything that's indented is part of the function's body. That's how Python knows what's inside the recipe and what's not. All right, let's tackle something that trips up a lot of people when they're starting out: the difference between parameters and arguments. It's actually pretty simple once you see it. Parameters are the placeholders you define in the function. See X and Y there? Those are parameters. They're like empty boxes waiting for something. Arguments are the actual values you put in those boxes when you use the function. So 3 and 4, those are arguments. I like to think of it this way. Parameters are the variable names. Arguments are the values. So a function can go off and do a bunch of work, which is great, but a lot of the time we need it to report back, to give us a result. And that's where the super important return statement comes into play. It's basically how the function hands a value back to the main part of your program. All right, time for a little pop quiz. Check out this code. We've got a function called square. It takes one number, x, and inside it calculates x times x. Simple enough. Then we call the function with the number 5, and we try to store whatever it gives back in a variable called result. But take a close look. There's no return keyword anywhere. So what do you think is actually inside that result variable after this code runs? And the answer is none. If you got that, nice one. Here's the deal. In Python, if a function runs all the way to the end and never hits a return statement, it automatically returns a special value called none. It's like the function did the math, but then just shrugged and walked away without telling anyone the answer. So that return statement is really powerful. The second your code hits return, the function is done. It stops right there, no matter what code comes after it, and sends that value back. And you can return pretty much anything you want. Numbers, strings, lists, you name it. You can even return multiple values at the same time, and Python is smart enough to bundle them up for you in what's called a tuple. Okay, so you've got the basics down. Now let's have a little fun and test that knowledge. I've got a couple of classic Python brain teasers for you, and trust me, these can catch everyone out, not just beginners. Okay, look closely at this one. We have a function append item. Notice that second parameter, items, has a default value. It's an empty list. Now we call the function once, adding the number 10, and store that in list 1. Then we call it again, adding 20, and store that in list 2. So the question is, what gets printed at the end? Do we get 2 separate lists, a syntax error, or something else? Take a second, think it through. And the answer is C. Both list 1 and list 2 are exactly the same. 10, 20.
Now, if your brain just did a little flip, don't worry, you're in good company. This is a classic gotcha. Let's break down why this happens. Okay, here's the secret. That default empty list, Python only creates it once, the moment it defines the function, not every time you call the function. So what's really happening is that every single call to append item is using and changing the very same list. The first call adds 10, the second call comes along and adds 20 to that exact same list. This is famously known as the mutable default argument trap, and once you understand it, you'll never forget it.
All right, ready for round two? Here we've got a stats function. It takes two numbers and returns three things: their sum, their product, and their difference. But look at what we're doing when we call it. We're trying to catch those three results, but we've only got two variables, x and y, waiting for them. So what's Python going to do about that? Yep, the answer is B. Python is going to throw an error. It's really picky about this. When you're unpacking values like this, you have to have the exact same number of variables on the left as you have values on the right. In our case, we've got three values coming back from the function, but only two variables to put them in. Python basically throws its hands up and says, whoa, I have an extra value here and nowhere to put it, and the program stops. Okay, we've gone through the fundamentals, we've survived the tricky parts. Now let's get to something that is truly one of the coolest and most powerful things about Python. So let this sink in for a second. We know a function can give you back a number. It can give you back a string. But could a function return another function? Absolutely, yes, it totally can. And I know that might sound a little weird at first, but this idea is at the very heart of what makes Python so flexible. In Python, functions are what we call first-class objects. That's just a fancy way of saying they're treated just like anything else. You can store a function in a variable, you can pass a function into another function as an argument, and, you guessed it, you can have a function return a brand new function. This lets us do something really cool, like build a function factory. Take a look at this outer function. All it does is define another function called inner right inside of it. And then the outer function's only job is to return the inner function. Notice it's not calling inner, it's just handing the function itself back. So when we assign myfunc equals outer, what we're really doing is making myfunc a copy of that inner function. Then we can call myfunc with parentheses to finally get our hello string. This is a seriously powerful pattern that unlocks all kinds of advanced programming techniques. So as we start to wrap this up, I just want to leave you with this thought from the legendary B.B. King. Everything we've talked about today, from the absolute basics of def all the way up to these mind-bending function factories, these are now tools that you have in your programming belt. So leave you with this question. Go back to that recipe idea. What's something you do over and over in your own code? What repetitive task can you wrap up into a nice, clean, reusable function? What's the first recipe you're going to write to make your own life easier? Thanks so much for joining me.